Hello everyone and welcome to Re-Entry. In this video we will be going through how to prepare for any of the traditional burns that you are going to be using in Project Gemini. Project Gemini is a quite complex spacecraft, especially compared to Project Mercury. And quite a lot of you would probably be kind of coming from Project Mercury into Gemini because it's kind of the natural next step after kind of more simpler Mercury missions. Mercury didn't have any orbital maneuvering capabilities, basically. It couldn't alter its current trajectory in space. With, of course, one exception, and that's the retrograde engine pack that allowed it to return back to Earth. Gemini, however, got an extra set of thrusters specifically designed to give it kind of the capability of translating sideways, upwards, downwards, aft, forward in all of its axes, basically. So it could be altering its current orbital trajectory in any direction, basically. And the OAMS, which is basically the Orbital Attitude and Maneuvering System, uses a few thrusters. And you can see that there's a couple of thrusters located on the exterior here. You have two in the bottom, and then you have someone on the sides, and someone that kind of points in the forward direction. And these thrusters gives it the capability to translate and change its attitude. So if we now step into the capsule itself, you see that we're currently in orbit around Earth, and our trajectory is at 120.5 nautical miles of altitude at apogee and 84.2 nautical miles of altitude at perigee. So this is kind of my orbit. And if I would now switch to make sure that OMS is on, that's done with these two switches. So it needs the prop motor valves to be open, and then it needs a control power for OMS to be set to on. And then I will go ahead and change my controls to rate command, which basically allows me to change the attitude using the OMS. And you can see that it's automatically trying to reduce the rates that I build up. That's kind of the rate command. If I now go to the exterior here, you can see that if I now kind of fire these two jets in the bottom and take a look at my orbital data on the map here, I will go ahead and translate forward. And you can see that kind of both of those apogee and perigee kind of increases. And if I perform a burn in the opposite direction, you can see that kind of the opposite happens. And this is how it alters its current orbit. You could always translate sideways as well, and then up and down, however you need based on kind of the orbit, the mission requirements. So if I now step back into the cockpit and I want to perform any burn, there's a specific piece of kind of data that will always be similar no matter what kind of burn you are going to be performing. And that's the catch-up maneuver pad. So if I open the catch-up maneuver pad, you will see kind of a blank piece of paper in front of you. And typically you would like to have this piece of paper either printed out next to you on an external tablet, which I'm usually doing, or you can use the in-game drawing tools to kind of note down the data. So very quickly, to use the in-game drawing tool, you open the form and you can drag it around and reposition it on the screen, and you can also scale it however you like. So I'm just gonna pull it up like this, and then there's a pen tool, and if you click that, you will see that there's a lock symbol showing up, which means that resizing has been locked. I'm no longer able to kind of resize this, but I'm now allowed to start drawing on this. So you can go ahead and kind of write down the data that you receive from mission control when you want to perform a burn. There's a toolbar here which has clear, redo, undo. You can save it. This exports it as a file that you can be, sent over Discord or by any other means. You have a pen and an eraser, and you can also use the scroll wheel to select the pen, the eraser, so quickly. And there's also a couple of stamps that you can use to type down numbers. So in the next few videos, I will be going through how to perform different kinds of burns in Gemini. I receive a lot of questions about this, and I also see that people are having some trouble on performing and executing burns correctly. So I'm going to create a couple of videos which will be using kind of this video as a reference to set up the pad correctly. So right now, to request the burn, there's a specific button for this. So you have request burns, and you can select what burn you wish to request. So right now, I'm not going to kind of go through how to execute the burn itself, but I'm going to go through how to plan for one. So currently, what I'm going to do is to just request an apogee circularization burn, which basically asks ground to calculate a burn, which I can do to circulate my orbit. And if you remember from kind of the initial part here, we had an orbit of 120.5 nautical miles and at 84.2 nautical miles. That's perigee, and this is apogee. And apogee is the point in the orbit which is the furthest away from Earth. That's kind of your the point where you will be the highest altitude above the surface of Earth. And you can see on the orbit view here that there's a node quite close to the sending node. This is just coincidence. It's not related that apogee should always be close to the sending or ascending node, but currently it is. That's just kind of the shape of my orbit. And apogee is marked by this color, and perigee is, if I now go 180 degrees to the other side of Earth, you will find the perigee point, which is marking this bluish kind of color. So that's how my orbit looks like. And currently I'm asking ground to calculate a burn that circulates my orbit at this altitude. This means that the spacecraft will need to travel all the way to apogee, fire its engines somehow, and do a burn so that perigee raises to have the same height as the apogee. So once I hit request, I received burn data here. So DCS uplink, ground is now telling me that we have a burn with a delta V. And the delta V is 65.47 feet per second, and this should happen at this time. So I'm just going to kind of close that first message. It's a brief summary of the burn. But you can also see that the DCS light is now illuminated, which means that ground has uplinked some data to the spacecraft. So I'm going to just hit the button below it to reset this light, so that it's easy to see if I receive another package at one point. So the focus of this video will be to go through what this pad actually means. So every burn is similar. You will receive some piece of data, and you can insert this data onto this piece of paper. And then by using this piece of paper, you can easily configure the OBC because it got a very specific format here with everything it needs to set this up correctly. So first of all, you can see that I've received a catcher burn pad, and the first field of data, they're all separated either by commas or this semicolon, which basically is the end of a section. So you can see that there's two rows of data before the semicolon. That's the two data points inside of the first column on the catch-up maneuver pad. So that's burn. And the first one is purpose, which is an AP. Then I'll just quickly do this, and a circularization burn. So that's the first piece of data. And the next one is propulsion and guidance. And what I'm going to be saying here that is that I will be using RCS, which is just using some jet to perform the burn, and then OBC, which is going to be our computer. So the computer will output some data that we can follow to execute this burn correctly. But to be able for the computer to execute this burn correctly, it will need to know some information about the burn itself. And that's kind of the rest of the pad. The next section says GETI, that's kind of the ground elapsed time of ignition, and it's 00027. And 00027, there's 5 digits, and you can see that there's also 5 kind of squares where you can enter and write down data. So I'm just going to type down those 00027 directly into this pad. And remember that I've also had the stamps that I could use, so I don't need to actually write the numbers myself. I can just simply select a stamp. And if you take a look at this format here, it has HHHMM. So that's basically the hours, and that's the first 3 digits. So at 0 hours into the mission and 27 minutes into the mission, that's when we want to perform our burn. But you can see that there's another part of this data point missing. So there's a comma and then there's a semicolon. So these both goes into the GTI section. So the first one is 0 and then 1755. So then I'll quickly just go ahead and type that 1755. And that's basically seconds and milliseconds. So you have 1755, that's 17.55 seconds. So this basically means that the burn will happen at 0 hours into the mission and 27 minutes into the mission and 17.55 seconds. If I take a look at my timer here, you can see that it's going to happen very soon. But I'm just going to go through the data itself, so I'm not going to actually execute the burn. So that basically means that the burn is now 2 minutes away. The next piece of data is X, Y, and Z. You can see delta V here, and X is 00655. So I'm just going to type that in, 00655. And the other two, they're all zeros, so I'm just gonna do something like this. So 00655 actually means 65.5 feet per second. And that's how much delta V we want to perform in the x-axis of this spacecraft in the local vertical at this time of ignition. So this is basically prograde. So at this time of ignition, we want to burn 65.5 feet per second in the prograde direction. And then we have a burn time of 32.73 seconds. So then I'll go ahead and just enter that. The next piece of data is not really relevant because we can perform any burn at any direction, but typically you would like to face prograde for this burn because everything is in the prograde direction. Then if I would be executing this burn, I would like to try to burn everything in one direction. So then you can maneuver the spacecraft in a prograde direction to make the burn quite simple to perform. And if I burn 65.5 feet per second in the prograde direction at this time of ignition, I will enter an orbit of about 120.5 nautical miles of altitude, and the same one with the next data because I requested circularization burn at apogee. So this is basically what the data actually means. And if I would go ahead now and go through the steps required to actually set up the computer following this pad, you will notice a couple of important data points on the right side here. So for each row, that are going to go into the computer. And notice that all of that is in this first few rows of data within this square. So 0, 1, that's actually the address of where this data should go in. So if I now go into the computer and I type 0, 1, and then the data is 0, 0, 0, so then I can go ahead and press 0, 0, 0, and then 2, 7. So that's the address. And then you have the 5 digits, which is the message itself. And all those leading zeros, they're always required. So then once I've typed in this data, I can go ahead and say enter. And clear basically doesn't clear the memory, it just clears the display. So next, I will go and type 02. And that data is 017, 017, and 55. And enter. So I can go ahead and now type 01 and read out. You can see 27 seconds. If I now would forget to type clear or hit the clear button and start typing 02, you can see that I'm starting to override this data, and it will continue to do so. Of course, nothing will ever happen unless you hit enter, so do not hit enter with false data. And this leaves kind of another point that I want to make. So if I go into core 25 and then I type 00655, that's the data that should go into this core 25. Always verify this data and make sure that you typed everything correctly before you actually insert anything into the computer. Because if you don't do that and there's some mistakes, it's always very hard to figure out why at a later point. So then I'll go ahead and verify 655 and enter. And clear 26 should be all zeros, so I can just hit enter on that one. And 27, all zeros as well. And now the computer knows everything it needs to know about the burn itself. So the next thing that we need to make sure is that the computer is running in its catch-up module. And that's something that you want to do probably ahead of requesting burns. And I knew that it's currently running, so you're in catch-up. You can see that by this selector here. But the computer is not running. And this means that it's not actually performing any calculations right now. Now, if I would hit start, and this data would be all correct and not in the past, then I would receive a green light here, and the IVIs would change into what I want the burn vector to be. But this is something that I'm going to go through in the next video, where I'm going to actually perform a circularization burn. But before I do that, I just want to highlight one important thing, which I've seen quite a lot of players getting lately, is that now they fill up this pad, and everything is ready. Maybe they're not aware of where they are in the mission, if you are haven't looked at the mission time yet maybe, or if you're been filling out some of this data incorrectly and you would hit start, you will see that a malfunction light is illuminated. And this is because you're trying to calculate a burn that has already should have already been, you know, you're planning a burn in the past, and that's not possible. So if you see this, hit reset, try to request a new burn, verify the data in all of these cores before you hit start again. So for example, if I now would go into this computer and I'll go into core 1, read out, and I will say that at 001 hours and 27 seconds into the mission, I want the burn to happen. Then I hit start, and you see that the comp light is green, malfunction light is not illuminated. Everything should then be ready, and the IVIs is showing a lot of numbers. So in the next video, I will be going through what these numbers means, and also I will go through how to execute the burn itself. So with that, I thank you for watching, and I hope you liked this little tutorial. please leave some feedback in the comment section and hit that subscribe button if you like this video. Have a good day. Thank you.